Okay, thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is the third video that I've done today, and it's in the spirit of exploring this different look of light imagery on dark, in this case black, matte paper. Okay, this is a 5x7 folded card. It doesn't have to be a folded card, but what I did was I was kind of curious about pigment ink or stamped imagery in white pigment ink, but in kind of more solid forms like this that happen to have a lot of detail in them. I've been using imagery like this pine earlier today, or these spiny branches, or it's the spooky branch, okay? But I was kind of curious to see how that ink would look and how the imagery would stamp out with these forms that are more solid, and they're just, you know, they have a lot of detail in them. I didn't know if it would kind of puddle up in them or not. And then I wanted to know what I could do with them after they were stamped out down here. Okay, now my original concept was, or my initial concept was, I was thinking this whole area would be kind of filled with snow. And I don't know, maybe it is, but if that was the case, then this whole floor would be probably better off if it was white. But I didn't want to add just a, you know, whole foundation of light paint down there. So what I did was I took a paintbrush, and with the Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and just a narrow brush like this, I added a lot of tone to certain sides of these trees, on a lot of the branches, and again on these little spiny branches down here at the base. Alright, and then I also added a lot of texture using things like the tiny rock stamps down below. And another thing that I was very curious about was how the Sedge filler would stamp out. There's a lot of dense little dots in there, and I wasn't quite sure how that would look stamped down here. You almost can't even tell that it was used. It's very subtle texture all throughout this whole area in here. But, okay, now all that being said, it looked okay, but there was something missing for me in terms of continuity between the different imagery. And that's where, just as in a lot of the colored scenes that I do with dye-based inks and glossy cardstock, the pigment ink application in the form of the Colorbox Frost White, okay, applied with a cotton swab, comes into play, but it really came into play here. So anytime where you see this kind of foggy mist, I've just kind of blotted off some area, and I've built up some tones in there, and I've blotted off this area right here, and I've layered down some more fog down here, and then I have some kind of coming up from the base here. So I think that texture in there and that value and lightness kind of brings everything together, I felt. And it gave it kind of that colored glow, like moonlight or something like that is hitting those areas in there, kind of and really illuminating it. So I didn't know how that would look either. I've just done a little bit on some stars before, but in here I used a ton of it. So I don't know, in this medium, in this technique, you know, if you want to add, you know, some of that texture down there with light pigment ink. This is almost like paint. Sometimes I call it like paint, but it's pigment ink. You can really add a lot down here, and it just all blends in with one another. If I just used it in one area, it would look weird, but so you have to kind of use it in, you know, throughout the composition. But when you do that, I don't know, it looks pretty cool. It's a real different look too. So My recommendation is pull out your stamps, and it doesn't matter which ones. I don't know, maybe a waterfall would look good with that kind of mist at the base of it. So, I don't know, it's a whole different look to these stamps that I've been using. And I guess it would be, because it's the exact opposite in terms of the medium, you know, in terms of stamping something dark on white. This is stamping something white on dark. It's still the same theory as far as blending your imagery together, but it's just a different kind of approach to that in terms of the values and looking at different things. You know, I'm thinking of highlights the whole time, where highlights in other scenes that I do, colored scenes, they're usually more like detailed embellishments, but here it's really integral to the entire composition, that idea of lightness in there, because that's what you're working with. I can't go, you know, black in here or something like that and add shadows. It just wouldn't show up. So I don't know. There's this whole thing too, and I have this box of colored pencils here too. I'm thinking about at some point in time, you can kind of play around with, you know, just a hint of some color in here too, and that might look kind of interesting. Or chalks, you know, you can put a little bit of color down here, maybe some blue or something like that. So there's a lot of doors opening up as far as the possibilities go, and there's a lot more to experiment with. So I don't know. Everything, it's all good, right? It's all fun. So if you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it as always, and thanks again for tuning into the channel. Okay, I rarely do 3 videos in one day, but these cards are really fun, and they're really fast, and it has me really curious about, I don't know, what can be done with this type of application of pigment ink on dark cardstock. Now, I've been working with mostly kind of these real spindly types of images. You know, they're, you know, narrow types of shapes and forms. Something that I could put a lot of paint on, things like the branches to represent snow. And I'm curious now about a different type of image. Okay, these ones have a lot more kind of solid form to them, and I'm just kind of curious to see what those would look like stamped out reversed, or with pigment ink on them, because pigment ink is kind of thick, right? So there's a lot of detail in this image. You know, it's mostly dark, and I'm just kind of wondering if it would puddle up in those tighter details there. Now, if I was working with a really brand new pad, I'm pretty sure it would fill up that all of those little spots in there. But I have one pad that's I've found to be really wet, and one's kind of medium dry. So I'm going to go with the medium dry one for this. And I think the other one, I don't remember when I re-inked it, but it must not have been too, well, I don't know. After I've re-inked it, I probably didn't use it too much. You know, I rarely use these pads to stamp images out. And I know, you know, all of you that do embossing do, but I rarely do embossing, so I'm just kind of using this pigment ink in just very minimal applications, you know, like I do with that kind of dry dabbing cotton swab technique. So my pads really stayed juicy for quite some time. Okay, this is the tree trunk image. It's number 087F. It's an older design of mine. It's always been one of my favorites, though. Okay, I'm going to have this one going off the top of the page. I'll put it about like so. Now this is a 5x7 matte cardstock that's been folded. So the folded form, it's 5 by 7. It's a pre-creased card, folded card, kind of incarnation. And I'm lazy, so I don't feel like taking like a, you know, what is it? Those bone. What is it called? I don't know. I never even use those ones. I just kind of fold my cards in half. But getting these pre-folded ones are kind of nice. All right, not too bad. It has a surprising amount of detail, I guess. For being pigment ink, you know, thick pigment ink at that. All right, now these ones, like I said, I have them going off the top of the page. Otherwise, you're going to have this kind of this flat, you know, area to address. Sometimes people went like this and created like a taller trunk out of it. Okay, this is Tree Trunk Trio. It's kind of its sibling image form. Another one of my first designs from Stampscapes. Probably designed, gosh, 1992-ish. Well, it's a long time ago, isn't it? Relatively speaking. Okay, I'm going to... I could do this at the same height, but I think I'm going to stamp it a little bit higher so it represents some trees farther back, okay? Quite typically, the higher you stamp something, the farther back it represents. That's what they do in what they call Western perspective. I think in some Asian prints or something, the higher you they position something. It's further back in time or something like that. I forgot. It represented something different, but in Western perspective, it's distance usually. I mean, that's not to say, you know, if I have an overhanging branch, that means it's way back in the distance, you know, or something like that. Okay, pretty cool so far. Let's go for... I'm trying to think if I should do one more over here. Let's go ahead and do that. Maybe not just one impression of that. Let's go for 2. I'm pretty pleased with the way these images stamp out in thick paint, although, you know, people have been embossing with these images for a long time too. Alright, I'm not sure if I want this running off that side of the card now that I look at it. But if I do want it in here, maybe I'll wipe this one off so it doesn't stamp out. Okay, I need to get some more paper towels here. Let me just... Alright, I'm just going to mask that off. I'll do it like this. Alright. There's my makeshift color ink blot page protector. It might stamp out a little bit, but that's alright. Alright. Repetition of form. 2 impressions of the Tree Trunk Trio, except I'm just stamping out a pair of them off of that design. Okay. Looks pretty good. That served its purpose. Now, the images are kind of floating in space, aren't they? So, I have a little bit of paint on my fingers. It's kind of getting on some things here. So, what I'm going to do, in regards to the images kind of floating in there, is I'm going to see what this Sedge filler looks like. Okay, normally I'm stamping that out in black or something, right? Or green, if it because it represents grass. All right, now this one I'm going to do a test print. I really don't know what any of this is going to look like. Yeah, it looks okay, I guess. There's a lot of tight detail in here, and I just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to look real blobby. Okay, center pressuring. Okay, don't rock this back and forth, otherwise it's going to probably look kind of strange. One thing about the pigment ink, it doesn't look like it doesn't quite blend as well with pigment ink, but I have plans for this, the surface of this composition, so I'm not really worried about that. And what I mean by that is where these images come together, it blends much easier in dye-based ink. Okay. Now, that's kind of taken care of the foundation but let's go up a little bit higher to represent some of the surface in the distance. Maybe not too far in the distance. Okay. Alright. Boy, these stamps look weird like this. Oops. Okay, now I want to go for some extra texture with these tiny rocks. This is the first time I've stamped most of these in any kind of pigment ink before. In fact, with what I've done today, this is the first time I've stamped really very much at all in pigment ink, because I really haven't done a lot of embossing in my life. I don't know, just a handful of times, so I haven't done this very much. I've probably doubled the amount of pigment ink stamping today just in these 3 scenes. Well, this is the third one. Double the amount in those 3 scenes as I have in my entire life. So believe me, I'm not an authority on very much when it comes to stamping, as far as like the different media out there. Okay, I'm adding in some texture, and I think that it adds a nice kind of variation to the surface. All right. It's kind of ghostly, isn't it? I really like the look, though. Okay, this is the... I keep forgetting the name of the stamp. I know all the names of my stamps up to about number 200. I know some of the other ones, like, you know, most of them, but some of them I tend to forget. I have kind of like limited RAM or something like that in my head. I used to know, I think I still know, well, maybe not all of them, but I knew most of the Marby colors and the numbers as well. Okay, stamping this out, kind of giving it a nice foundation. Okay, this is a stamp, I don't know, it's really becoming one of my favorites lately. I really like the look of it in so many scenes. In black, or it looks good in white too. Any of these kind of spindly types of images look pretty cool like that. That is really fun. It's a really different look. I guess that's why I'm doing so many today. When you're kind of introduced to something new, that's kind of exciting. I mean, isn't that just so much fun? All right. So far, so good. I know I always say, these are kind of experiments, and you should go into it. I feel it's a good kind of mindset to go into something like this with that thinking that way. But I'm going to add in that extra paint in here, and I'm thinking, I haven't worked on kind of a surface yet. I've just done these branches kind of going off into, the sky in these cards so far, like something like that, right? So I haven't done a surface yet, so I plan on doing kind of like patchy snow down here and kind of piled up, on the around the base of the trees. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for a quote stamp, maybe some trees too. So I tell you what, I'm going to look for that, and I'm going to let this set up for about 5 minutes. And I tell you what, I think I'm going to need a lot of white paint in here too, so I'm going to add a few drops of water to that and then mix it up, and I'll come back and I'll start really dressing this up with some additional value, and that being white. All right, so let's get that done. Okay, I'm back. I think I found a quote that I might use in here. Between every two pines is a doorway to a new world, by John Muir. I think that'll fit right in here. But let's see how it goes. I can always change my mind. First, I'm going to take Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white. It's an opaque white watercolor paint, and they call it bleed-proof because it is very, very opaque. You just kind of get it to the right consistency, or whatever consistency you want. I just kind of squirt some water into it to kind of reconstitute it, and let me see how much I have on here. Ooh, that's kind of too much. It's really watery. Maybe I should get it a little bit. It looks okay. I just want to get it to the right consistency. I don't want a big blob of paint. I might start applying more as I go, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start applying to some of these branches. Where some snow might have collected. I want to find kind of an excuse somewhere where this paint would kind of make sense. And snow is a very reflective, substance, so I'm putting this on those branches like that. Like kind of some gentle snowfall kind of sitting on those. And in doing marks like this, you can kind of give your trees, or whatever forms you put this on, you can really give them a lot of kind of this three-dimensional feeling, I guess. Okay. Now I'm going to be putting this down here on the ground, and I don't know how this is going to go. Well, I tell you what, before I do that, let me just kind of get into the swing of things here, and I'll put some on those kind of little, spiny branches. I think that's what that's called, or is it? Or winter something. All of the names of the stamps are down below in the description section. You just kind of press show more, click on the show more, and it'll tell you all the different media that I use and the names of the stamps. I don't know, maybe after doing 3 scenes today, my mind's just kind of gone blank. This branch, or bush, or whatever, kind of disappears where it goes in front of the tree, because the tree's of the same value. So, kind of doing some of this, some of these marks on the bush kind of brings it out to the front again, instead of having it kind of disappear into the forms of the tree trunk. Okay. Whether this is snow or just kind of an ice on the branches, it's up to your interpretation. Or the interpretation of your viewer. It's easier for me to kind of pull this way. I can kind of trail the that stroke off a little bit easier this way. So working on the card upside down is the most ergonomic way for that, and a way that I can access the forms better. So don't be afraid to just kind of rotate your card around for the best application of whatever media you're working in. Okay, so we have that. It's kind of fun. Alright, now let's see what we can do about doing some things that represent snow. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit more paint on this brush, as I have a feeling I'm going to have to get kind of generous with it. In theory, this whole flat area would be kind of in patchy snow, but you know, I don't want to do that. I don't want to just have, you know, the whole thing just white. That would just be too much, I think. So I'm putting some of this on these trees, you know, and some of that snow. Maybe I'll trail it off a little bit. Yeah, it's this, at this point in time, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I'm just going to have to see how it goes. Okay. And I'll kind of do the same thing on the different tree forms, okay? If you do it on one, it's usually best to kind of repeat that same kind of idea. Texture, color, whatnot, or at least bring some element into other parts of your compositions. It just brings continuity, and from a visual standpoint, or textural one, I mean, a visual textural, it just makes sense from that standpoint. Okay. See, kind of on the inside portions of a lot of these, or these three at least, trunks here, I'm putting the highlights or that snowy patchy kind of look on one side. And let's see, I don't know, we'll see if that kind of pays off in the end, I don't know. Snow is a very reflective substance. Okay, now let's do the same thing. Here's my question. Do I center light this? I think it's best if I keep the lighting consistent. Even on this trunk right here, I'll put the lighting on the left side of it. Otherwise it kind of might look weird. But we shall see. Okay, this is a big tree trunk, so I think it can probably stand to use quite a bit of this. This bleed-proof white, it dries pretty fast. It's very chalky, which is the thing that I'm guessing makes it so opaque. And this little texture that I'm doing, it's just kind of, you know, putting it on somewhat haphazard, and I mean, it's in a targeted area, but kind of this, I don't know, you can almost kind of do whatever you want. Kind of being a little bit more kind of jittery with it, because I feel like it kind of lends itself to the look of this, you know, the idea of bark. Okay, now let's see, I'm going to build up some more snow right here. Okay. And again, I'm working upside down, I know. See this, if I do this like this, then my hand's going to go right into this area right here, so I have better access this way. Sometimes when you have things upside down too, you might be accessing a different part of your brain. There was this book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. And she taught at Long Beach State. Not really in the art department. I forget what it was for. Well, it might have been an art class, but it wasn't any for the art majors. It didn't count for any of our majors, but I always wanted to take that class. But they often worked on things kind of upside down, like portraits and whatnot. And when you did that, I guess the idea was that you're accessing a different portion of your brain, or part of the brain, than doing it right side up, where you might be kind of too analytical about it, and you know, because when you're drawing a nose or something, you're thinking of a nose, and you might not be drawing what you're observing. You know, you might be drawing your interpretation of it or something. But in flipping it upside down, you're no longer thinking about nose, eye, hair, whatever. It's you're just kind of observing the form and maybe seeing it in a more true kind of a form or shape, whatnot. Okay, almost there with this tree. Okay. It's kind of interesting illumination to me. Okay, and this is a lot more painting. It's also, probably it's more paintbrushing than stamping in this case, but kind of fun. Okay, let's see here. Let's go in and let's add some kind of like little textural elements in here. We have those tiny rocks that, you know, we did that with. But let's go in. Well, maybe on some of these rocks, maybe I can give a little highlight on some of them and make them seem a little bit more dimensional. Seems like this is a good exercise for something. I'm not really quite sure what. Maybe, I don't know, maybe lighting or something, or forms, volumes. It'd be kind of interesting if this, instead of this bleed-proof white, I was doing this in glow-in-the-dark paint. And then you give this card to someone and it, you know, it has that kind of weird type of look to it. I think it's glowing in the dark. It'd be kind of cool. Kind of adding a little bit more, getting a little bit more bold with it. All right. I wonder if I can add some kind of fog effects down here too. It looked okay when I did it around stars, but let's give it a try here. That's what this is about. Colorbox, white pigment ink, frost white. It's kind of a slow drying pigment ink by Scenic. Clear Snap, sorry. Yeah. I must be in like a real experimental mode. I know that was Clear Snap, but I don't know. The left side of my brain, or whatever side's memory is like turned off. Okay, let's add in, or see if we can add in, kind of a little bit of fog in here. I don't know if it's going to work or not. It might. I don't know what it's going to look like because I'm doing this over white imagery, so I'm usually doing it over dark imagery. Over this it just might look kind of blurry. I'm not sure. Okay, now I'm just adding this in kind of a dry brush touch. Okay, you don't want to go in and add big thick balls of paint in there, I don't think. When I'm doing this on dye-based inks and glossy cardstock, I don't want that. So, but this is a different technique here. This is a different look, so I'm just guessing. You don't want to use too much. I don't know, maybe in this instance, maybe more is better. I'm not sure. I'm not sure with any of this, but maybe we'll find out. I'll tell you what, I think I'm just realizing something here. I'm going to add a bank of fog in back there, but I need some paper towels to mask that off, and I don't have any here on my desk, so let me go get some. Okay, brand new roll of paper towels. When I do that type of masking that I do, usually just torn paper towel. Sometimes people have asked, okay, what brand is that you're using? And as silly as it seems, and it did seem to me at the time when people used to ask that, there is something to some brands that are a little bit better than others. Okay, now like this one, I was tearing it this way, and there is a grain to paper towels. Okay, it's a little bit too jagged, and there's like single ply there. So I ripped it this way, and that gave me kind of a, this curvy, more kind of solid tear. And I don't know, what is this, brawny or something like that? But anyways, what I'm using that for is I'm going to mask off that background, okay? And the kind of the slope that I created with that Sedge filler, I think it might be interesting to create a little bit of a separation between land and sky. Okay, if I can. Let's see how this goes. It's it's like if I had a like a cotton ball, maybe that would work better, but okay. Let's just do it slowly, okay? I'm just gonna do it. Ever so slowly. Because again, I don't want to have these big balls of paint on my paper, okay? So it's kind of like I feel like a sewing machine or something like that. Dabbing this down on the surface. And what I'm doing is where I'm kind of right on the paper towel, I'm adding a little bit more, okay? Now with fog, I mean, you kind of want to have it dissipate a little bit as it trails up, in this case. So I'm applying more right at the meeting point, okay? And then a little bit less as I move up. But, you know, we'll have it a little bit irregular too, okay? Maybe this will be the technique kind of that comes from this composition. I have a feeling it might be, because the scene seems to kind of need it, you know? It's because this is kind of more of a full scene here. And the other scenes or cards that I did in this medium today, they're kind of more like they're more like still lifes in some ways. You know, there's not, I don't have a lot of deep space represented, you know, in terms of you know, the field of view in those cards. They're like a pair of branches, or just kind of like a row of trees. Okay. Let's take a look. Okay. See that? Or can you? Here. It's kind of that row in the background. I think that looks pretty good. Let's keep doing that though. It's not too much different than the torn paper kind of sponging technique. You know, like for doing sky or kind of like background hills, you know, when you do that. Same type of deal, except you're just doing it with pigment ink, and it's a little bit more, you know, it's like a reverse application. Instead of laying down darker tone on white paper, you're laying down light tone on dark paper. Okay. It's kind of interesting. Let's do the same thing down here too. Let's create another kind of bank of fog, okay? Let's do it in layers. Again, kind of, it's like that torn paper towel type of technique. You're just kind of lowering it or change it around, you know, a little bit. It could be this texture, this kind of fog, that's the element to kind of unify all of the different forms in this scene. I mean, they were okay before, but I think this is kind of doing the trick. Just giving some variation to kind of different areas too. It's kind of weird for me doing this on this trunk right here because, you know, all of my stamping life, I'm usually adding shadows at the base of this trunk, you know, to make it look really like it's really kind of anchored into the scene. So now I'm doing kind of the opposite of what I've always done. It's kind of the same spirit, but it's just the opposite tone, I guess. The more I add, the lighter it gets. Instead of using the stylus tool with inks, the more I do, the darker it gets, you know, with that. Okay. Boy, that sure looks like some nice illumination, I think. Okay, so we have those areas right in there. I think it looks really good, so I'm just going to keep adding more. Because so far I haven't added so much anywhere that it kind of looks weird. So there must be a lot of leeway to it. Okay. Alright, now let's add some more here in the foreground. Let's say it's just like we're standing in it somewhere. I guess this fog, you know, sometimes when I'm doing it on colored scenes where I've, you know, laid down a lot of dye-based inks, I mean, there's definitely a point at some point in time where you can add way too much of it. That's why I kind of remove when I'm doing that technique. I'm oftentimes, and I say it too, I remove more than I add on, because I keep adding it on, but then I kind of take it off where it looks like too much. But this, I don't know, it seems like it's blending into the background more, because I don't know, maybe because pigment ink, impressions, or the textures that are all in here, it fits in here really nicely. So I don't know, I'm just tapping around everywhere and it doesn't look kind of forced anywhere. I'm finding that putting this at the base of some of these bushes, or around some of those bushes, it looks kind of interesting. It's like the forms, the more kind of sharper forms kind of come out of that mist a little bit. Alright, let's put a lot more around right here where we have a lot of that snow. It's very reflective around that trunk. Okay, I think this scene has taken on, officially taken on a different characteristic than what I thought it would have going into it. I thought it would be more about kind of the snow, but I think it's becoming more about the fog. I don't know, what do you think? You know, that atmosphere in there is I don't know, it's kind of being defined by this, not by the paintbrush applications like the other scenes earlier today. So, that's good in terms of variation. And variation in just something new. Anytime you do something and you're introduced to something new, I think that's really fun. Okay, let's see. Especially if you see it kind of developing right before your eyes. I can't tell you how many times pigment ink has kind of saved me in terms of my scenes. Just that softer type of look or texture. The pigment ink can also, it can certainly kind of subdue something visually, you know, where it's not quite as apparent anymore. So if you have something that, you know, doesn't look quite the way you want it to, if you put a little pigment ink over it, then it kind of obscures it. I mean, you can go the other way too and put something in darkness, but the pigment ink makes something, this type of thing, it makes it look translucent, so that translucency kind of knocks down the definition of the forms behind it. Now, I usually don't do this. I'm trying to get a little bit blobby in some areas just so it looks like a kind of a brighter, lighter area of the fog. Because I'm finding that it doesn't kind of look out of place to have that kind of lighter there. It's like, you know, I guess this is, in theory, it's underneath the canopy of trees, and let's say there's moonlight coming in from the side, illuminating these things, so just some areas get illuminated more than others, you know, or little spot, you know, areas of illumination, you know, where the moonlight is peeking through the trees. Alright, I don't think I've ever applied this much pigment ink on anything before, on any scene. So this is going to be a record for me. Okay. I think. Alright, let's go a little bit higher on this tree. Okay, that looks kind of nuts. It's fun, though. It looks like, I don't know, it looks illuminated to me. I would maybe create a little bit more of a transition right here, but I think it looks okay. Interesting, to say the least. For me. Okay. Let's get that word stamp. This is the cling foam mounted version of it. Let's see, which way do I want to go? Between every two pines is a doorway to a new world. I don't know, it seems appropriate for this scene for me because this is kind of a different take on numerous imagery here that I'm very familiar with, but just not in this medium and or technique. So it's a great new stamp world for me. And don't worry, I'm not, you know, leaving my dye-based inks behind or anything like that. But for one day, and 3 scenes later, why not, you know? Where do I want this? A little bit lower, I think. Okay, I need to move this down a little bit because I need it closer to me to get it straight, or as straight as I can. The camera's like right here, right in front of my face, so. Okay, I need to compose. Too high. Too low. I think that's just right there. I just eyeball things. I'm lining up this with that crease up there. Hopefully. Light, even pressure. Okay. If it isn't perfectly straight, it's straight enough for me. Okay. I don't know. It makes for an interesting composition. To me, at least. I don't know. And here's my card format. It'd probably be better to, if this was like on a black piece of cardstock, and wouldn't it be cool to have like a little bit of a silver matte, and then put that, you know, on a card, but, you know, this is for like the lazy person, meaning me. Okay, between every 2 pines is a doorway to a new world. Let's do something with, Alright, I'm not going to do white gel pen stars, okay? I'm going to do, I think, silver stars up here in the sky. And maybe I won't add too many. I'll see. Oh my god. I love that. That looks pretty cool. Man. I always say that in scenic stamping, I've been doing it a long time, but honestly feel like I'm just, you know, scratching the surface as far as, you know, my own what's the word, approach to them or whatever, you know. I honestly think that there's a lot more that can be done, so I'm doing a lot more experimentation over the last, what is it, few months, and I'm seeing all kinds of things. You kind of have to get in the mindset, though, sometimes. You know, my mindset for a lot of the time is refinement. I want to learn new things in a given technique or whatever. And that's fun. And there's always new, you know, color schemes and compositions that can be done. I mean, when you start getting into compositions, it's just endless, you know, of what you can do with nature stamps. You know, they don't have to be used one way. You can use them alone in conjunction with the other sibling imagery. You can use them with stamps from other companies. There's some really great nature stamps out there, or just the subject matter. You can use Stampscape stamps as background stamps, and you can feature kind of the subject matter from another company, and it really can expand the type of visual vocabulary you can achieve. You know, sometimes it's more whimsical, with kind of a different imagery. I love old engravings. There's some stamp companies that have a lot of old engravings in their line, and I really love those because they really have a lot of tight detail in them. And those work really well with the real detailed imagery from, you know, that we do at Stampscapes. Okay, that was a lot of silver, but I really like it. It looks just white there to you, I'm sure, but there is a little bit of a kind of a reflective quality up close, and it's not so stark white. Maybe it recedes a little bit, okay, being silver, and the nature of kind of metallic pens and inks and whatnot is that they can potentially reflect some of that lighting if held up. Yeah, okay, there it is right there. I'm kind of, see that right there? It's kind of a I have no idea what shows up in the camera when I'm doing this. I'm just looking at the back of the screen now, but, you know, it kind of catches the light in a very subtle way. All right, but here's that card. The card format, as you can see what it looks like. But I love what's going on here. Doesn't that really look illuminated, though? By something. And then it's kind of, I don't know if it's whimsical or just, I don't know, whatever it is, it's something. I don't know how to describe it. I just haven't done that before, so. Alright, so I guess fog and that pigment ink application can look kind of cool on black paper. Usually I do it where light meets dark. I guess this is where light meets dark, I don't know, but that's just in that whole field of darkness and just kind of created that kind of that mistiness in that whole area. I think it can use a little bit more still, but I think I'll stop right there. But I don't know. I'd like a little bit more variation. You know, just sometimes when it dries kind of darker. So that what you do is you just kind of go in there and you just kind of apply a little bit more in there, like so. And you just kind of build it up a little bit more, which is kind of a good thing because there's a lot of control over it that way. I mean, it's a good thing it doesn't dry lighter, because then you don't know what you're going to get, you know, when it dries. But if it dries a little bit darker, then you can apply more, and it'll slowly start to build up to a lighter value for you. Okay, so between every 2 pines is a doorway to a new world. Kind of looks New Worldish, and then there's the stars out there. I mean, it would work perfectly well in you know, a daytime scene as well. But I don't know. This one, like I said, it's a new world for me. It's a new visual for me, at least. And I could put some of that little foggy mist, you know, glowing light around some of these other stars. I think that would be too much, though. Let's just leave the sky with crisp star imagery up there, because there just is so much texture going on down in this area. Okay, so that foggy kind of blanket, or that blanket of fog down here, I think it unified everything a little bit more, and it kind of provided that foundation that was lacking without it. So it really changed the spirit of it, don't you think? So it's really fun stuff, and again, it's always kind of fulfilling to play around with new techniques and just to try and experiment and see what comes out from your different media. In this case, it's just media that I've always had, but I just haven't used it in that manner, so it's kind of fun being in the spirit of exploration every now and then. Other times in more of the spirit of refinement and whatnot, and just playing around with different compositions in a given technique. But I don't know, this sure is a lot of fun playing around with things like this too. And it expands the range of possibilities too with your given supplies. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks as always for tuning into the channel.